Alright, so that's good, but we want those little punch-outs to have some thickness. We get in there and they're just these paper-thin perfection here, and we don't want that. We want them to have a little bit of thickness. So what those are is, if you look at you look at the front view here, or you look at the turn on edge faces, you can see all the faces. The cutouts are comprised of edges, so I could turn on edge mode and click this edge and click that edge, and hold down Control and click the other edge. Oops, except I'm clicking that edge. I can't quite get that edge. I got an edge I didn't mean to get. And so on and so forth. It can be a little bit difficult to select edges in a way. Of course, by turning on preview selection, that helps, so that you can say, oh, edge, edge, edge. Great. This is genius. Except I accidentally got one there. But since these edges are part of a punch out here, they are edges at the edge of the thing. They have a special status, and that's called a border. So if I click, and I have even with preview selection on, it'll show me what I'm about to get. I'm about to get that border, and hold down Control, that border, border, get all these borders here. And what we can do is then create some geometry. If you hold down Shift, you don't even need an extra tool in here. If you just hold down Shift and drag, you'll actually create a little extrude there. So you actually create some geometry, create a little bit of an edge, which adds just that extra touch of realism there. You can even scale these so that it, do they bevel in? Do they bevel out? And if you're in pivot point center, if you're in object center, they're going to go out altogether, and that's not really that useful in this case. Alright, a couple extra things here and a couple extra tools. I'm going to create some new geometry. Always kind of best to, let's create a chamfer cylinder. And what I can do is turn on auto grid here, and I can even turn on snapping. It's going to snap to the center, I guess, to the pivot. But we could also snap to vertices if we wanted to. So each vertex you could also snap to. In this case, the grid point or the pivot point works just fine. And you'll kind of see what the snaps do when you are engaged in any one mode. They have a special icon that they behave on. So my grid points here, vertices, when I'm snapping to a vertex, or when it's about to snap to a vertex, it shows a little cyan just cross, just like here. When it's about to snap to a pivot point, it will show an icon that looks like that. Snapping to a lot of things here, so I'm not sure we get that pivot to show. There it is. The pivot will show, and it'll also put a bounding box around the object that you're snapping the pivot to. Okay, so you can see it just barely in there, right there. And then the bounding box around the object that you're snapping to, whoever's pivot you're snapping to. So cylinder, click, set the bevel, or the chamfer, the fillet. We need a couple more segments on the fillet there. It's pronounced fillet, not fillet, just in case you're wondering. I think I'm pronouncing it wrong, but I'm not. And increase the number of sides here. 16. That should be okay for now. And then, in this case, I also want to set a couple of height segments here, because I'm actually going to have a couple of distinct levels to this thing. So what I'll do is go to the modifier. I'm going to edit poly, and I'm going to grab some vertices. So I'm going to take these vertices here, and then I'm going to scale. So if I click here, it's going to scale in these two axes and not that third. So you can see, if you keep your eye down here, it's not scaling up in Z. And then I'm going to take a polygon. Let's take these middle bits. Make sure we're on select. Grab all those. And you can see right here, I've got the back side of those two. And so when you're selecting things, you want to be careful. Do you have the back side? Do you have all sides of something? Do you have more than you need? You can look through here, and it's a little bit hard to tell in this perspective view, but if you go to wireframe, you'll see, yeah, indeed I have both sides of that picked. So you want to be careful of that. Of course, I can always just hold down Alt and unpick that back side. So before you do any kind of operations, you want to make sure that you've not gotten any back-facing polygons, or you can deselect here and you can say ignore back-facing, and that way it'll ignore it for you. And then you can go ahead just about your happy way picking things on the front, knowing that you're not going to be picking things on the back side of stuff. It's a really handy tool, this ignore back-facing. All right. So what we're going to do is go into this edit poly, and we're going to do just a bevel, I guess. So we're going to go in on this, and then click and drag to set the bevel, and then we have an inset. And now if I make any other modifications to this thing, I'll add another edit poly. All right, and so then I can pick by faces here, and let's turn on edged faces. That always helps. Edged faces very often helps when you're trying to pick in the shaded view, because a lot of times you don't exactly know what you're doing. So this mode is incredibly helpful. So I'm going to bevel, and then scale that down.